through this process. Look at that manual workarounds. Do you have documented if your systems are down, how you're going to be able to do that, or if you couldn't come into the office to perform certain functions to support your organization, your critical applications, your vital records, your specific needs. And so what we're trying to do here is to figure out what business functions need to be recovered, the order, and how quickly. And this will all be based upon the impact metrics that come together as we go forward. Now, we do this in a business impact analysis, is what the term is called, and we use an in, out, and across process. Think about all the processes within each one of your departments. First of all, think about everything that moves in and out of the department, and then we aggregate that for the company as a whole. Then we go back and look at the impacts of a crisis on the business and the people on each one of those departments to help us come together. And then we start to establish a framework to mitigate the exposures and optimize the recovery. And we view this from a strategic, financial, operational, and an external perspective, because obviously the brand and image and reputation of our company becomes the most important to us. If our customers can't count on us to deliver the products and services that we do, they're going to go to someone else. If it was caused by a disaster and we can't get back up and running, once that customer has learned someone else is out there, we've lost that opportunity, and we may have lost it for the year or for years to follow as we go through. So think about each department. What happens if you do not do this function? It's about the impact of the company. Some departments could be postponed. We recently worked with a company where they had a very extensive long-term planning capability set up. Well, in the middle of a disaster, I'm not worried about what we're going to be doing in 5 years. I'm worried about what we're going to be doing right now. What keeps the business running? What can wait till later? And so we're going to triage through this process, and the business impact analysis gives us the documentation and the specific information that leads us to that conclusion. So document. So how do we do it? We do a document review. You look at what's already in place. You probably have some procedures. You may have a business continuity plan. You may have an emergency plan. Maybe you've done a risk assessment or a vulnerability threat assessment for your business and what you're concerned about. So as we do that, then we would design a questionnaire that would go out to key department heads to share their insights on it, and we'll talk about what's included in that. Then you'd want to go back and analyze that information and then do some interviews with them. Sometimes what someone writes on a form or fills out in a question response becomes different when you start asking the follow-up questions and you start trying to understand it. You then create a draft report, you have a discussion, and a final report. So that's the process that we would go through. Now let's go underneath the covers and look at the details. The first thing you're going to have to do is look at your organizational chart. What are the departments that you would think about? And we just threw some up here at random that we have seen regularly in companies. Maybe you have other departments within your organization, or you may well have some of these. But when you've identified those critical departments, those are the ones that we want to physically look at how they're impacted. If their department did not function, what would those impacts be on the company as a whole? And then we aggregate it to complete the business impact analysis. So it will identify the criticality of each business function, and we're going to rank order them. We're not saying that a department is no longer valuable, but if we don't recover this department, we can't recover any others. Maybe getting your technology up is very important initially. We worked with a manufacturer in New Jersey where the testing department became very critical because they couldn't ship anything until the product itself had been tested, given the nature of what they were creating and carrying forward. Sometimes you'll see HR view themselves as the most critical, and in fact they probably aren't, because the functions of the company can continue even without the HR department working there. We look at the interdependencies between these functions. My department depends upon that department for this function, and understand what those are. We look at external dependencies. What does my department depend on? Who are they externally? Are they sole source? Is there an alternative? Because analyzing the supplier risk will be a key element to determine where the exposures would come in. Maybe the event that occurred didn't hit our company, but we lost a key critical supplier, therefore we can't make our product or service. So the BIA will allow you to do that. Application dependencies, which applications are mission critical, which are not, the vital records, the impacts of not performing the function financially and operationally, the recovery time objective, how long we can't afford to have this department out more than a day or 2 days or 3 days, or that department might be able to be out for 10 days. And the recovery point objective is the point in time which we need to be able to go back and recreate it. And then what resources are required. So the BIA gives us the critical information that becomes the foundation of all of the subsequent plans that are developed for the company. And it gives you buy-in for all of the departments so that they feel that they've had an input and are coming together. This is the cornerstone of creating the culture of preparedness within your organization. And so now you're not dealing anymore in somebody's gut opinion, that's going to happen or not happen. You've got specifics that will support that operation as you carry forward with it. So what's critical? When we think about trying to identify criticality within a company, it's what's the importance of the operation and what's the time sensitivity. Is it something that can be deferred? Is it something that we have to have right now? And so that will be a key indicator as you're going forward. Typically, critically, or life safety or environmental controls, customer service or support, anything that's generating revenue, those are going to go to the top of our list from a criticality standpoint. You can develop your own ranking criteria. We certainly, if you want to reach out to Firestorm, can help in determining those elements. Because at the end of the day, you only have so much resource, and you're going to have to use those funds, those people, those activities to get the most critical functions up first, and then the other departments will follow thereafter. Clearly, all departments within your company are important, or you wouldn't have them there, but there is an order in which we must address. So you look at every function in the same light. How long can the company not perform this function without causing significant financial loss, customer unhappiness, penalties or fines from regulators, or even lawsuits? And those things that become clear will go to the top of the list. Those that there's not any impact on, and with the survey questionnaire that we talked about in the interviews, if the person says, well, there's no real financial impact on the company, we're not going to have any fines, we're not going to have any penalties, in fact, the customer won't even be aware that this department's not here, they're going to be one of the last departments that we bring up within our company. Now, the questionnaire that I talked about, and I just did a quick copy of a couple of pages so you can see, and they would list the department, the number of employees, the number of contractors they might have. They would list the specific business functions performed in the department, and then we give them a scenario, and then they start to ask questions. Their recovery time objectives, their operations, how long will it take them to get back up and running, how much data could they use. And this questionnaire is fairly simple. It takes, probably 30 minutes to complete, but it gives us very specific information about what's going on in the company. And then with the follow-up interviews, you get a great deal of clarity as you're designing it. So when we think about the criticality of the business function, there would be some questions. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Blair.
You mentioned a term, recovery time objective, RTO. You might want to just take a minute. I'm not sure if everyone on the phone would understand what that term is.
Okay, good. And we've got another slide coming up to clarify a little bit more, but I think you're on target, Blair. If an event occurs, how long can we wait before this department has to become operational again? In some cases, you might, if we lose our IT and systems capabilities, you might feel like we got to get that up, then the other departments can start to come back together. So if is that a day? Is that 2 days? Is that 3 days? And the way we determine that is by the slide that's up right now. If you look here, we're going to focus on what are the operational impacts and what are the financial impacts. And it looks like I copied operational twice and didn't include financial. But if you look at just the operational here, what are the contractual requirements? What are the regulatory compliance? Reputation and image, quality of service to clients, negative impact on clients. And we rate it from no impact to severe impact. And as these numbers come up, now we have very specific things that we can come back and share within this element in putting it together. So we list this out, and for example, if someone says, oh, we're going to have fines and penalties, but there's no regulatory compliance, that's where the interview would come in to determine what do you mean, and you think about it. So the recovery time frames for the businesses, this recovery time objectives, they're driven by the consequences of not performing those functions. Specifically, what's the maximum amount of time the company can tolerate the absence of this? And when you start looking at that, then we're going to say, is it a day? Is it 2 to 3, 4 to 7? And we're going to determine this on a department-by-department function within the organization. So all business functions need to be reactive based on their recovery priority. And as we think about it, as the criticality of the department increases, the higher the recovery priority and the shorter the recovery time that we're going to have. So that seems intuitively obvious, but I want to make sure it's really clear. We're not saying a department or a function is not important. We're saying that we have to start somewhere. Where, in fact, do we start? So how much data loss can you tolerate? That's another area to be focusing on. And if you look at the example there with the little illustration at the bottom of the slide, you're typing new stuff into the computer, you lose, the systems go down. From the time you did the last backup to when the systems come back up, you've lost all the data that you've entered if you don't have an adequate backup. So that point of failure becomes the key driving area as we're focused on just the data aspects alone. So with the recovery objective and the recovery point, we determined that the shorter we make that time frame, the more expensive it is. That's why those dollar signs are up there. If you make a decision, well, we have to be back up instantaneously, that's very expensive. Let's just continue in the data conversation and the information systems. If we mirror our systems, if we get everything that we're operating in identified and have it backed up real time so that it's completely redundant, it's in my company's building and we've got another site outside and they're backed up, that's very expensive. So in many cases, firms would do a backup at the end of the day or overnight, or do a backup tape and carry it forward. So determining how much criticality, how short we have to make this, we would spend more and more money. If something happened to our manufacturing plant, and we already had a second manufacturing plant with all the duplicate equipment in it, and we could immediately pick up and go over there, we'd be back up and running instantly. Well, that would be too expensive to have a second facility, 100% duplication as we carry that out. So we start to make those determinations across this, and the longer we're willing to wait, then the cheaper it becomes. And so there's some cost-benefit relationships and the trade-off here around it. And I think that's why Blair brought up the issue of the recovery time objective as we're focused on. Now, as we shift from the recovery time and the recovery priorities associated with it, we start to look at the dependencies. Who does your department depend on for your daily operations? And so you'd list that department that we have to have do their job. If you're in a manufacturing environment, maybe it's the engineering department that does the design, that gives you the specs of what you're making, or maybe it's the testing, as I talked about earlier. All of those things could be departments. If you're in the production line and you're running have a tool and die operation, you can't do it until someone says this is what you need to do associated with it. So the BIA then brings all of that information together. Go back to that concept that we talked about earlier, knowledge continuity within your organization, And so you would see my department depends on these 6 departments, and here's what we depend on that department for. Boom, boom, boom. Externally, you think about my department depends upon this department, this outside vendor, this supplier for this, and is there an alternative source? Many times we find ourselves in a sole source area. We had done some work with a firm that was working with guidance systems for ballistic missiles, and they were doing the wiring harnesses in the middle of those. And I don't know about you, but I'd like my guided missile to go where I aim it for. Accuracy would be pretty important, but there was a key component in that it had to go through that was a brass housing associated with it, and they only had one supplier for that, and that supplier was located in San Francisco. Well, if you think about it, that's a critical component. There could be an earthquake in San Francisco, and unless you kept a buffer stock of that component, or you could identify an alternative source, an event that occurred in San Francisco would have a direct impact upon your business in New Jersey. That means we need to kind of look at that and see what other things that we can do to work around, because that could take us down. We're in an environment today where we only own 10 or 15% of our supply chain. We have an 85 to 90% dependency on third parties. This identification of these external dependencies becomes absolutely critical in this process, and particularly if it's sole source. If you don't have an alternative source, that's a single point of failure exposure within your organization. That's why it becomes so absolutely critical to you within it. Now, we also look at the applications, the systems that we're doing, and we ask each department to tell us which ones they do, what they use that system for, where is it located, and is it on an external? Is it supplied by someone else? And so if we're down but their site's up, we can use it, or is it on our server? And mission critical is we can't do our job unless we have it. It's essential. We'll have some impact, but we can find a way to survive without it. It's deferrable. It's nice to have, but it's not going to be something. So this kind of a red, yellow, green type of an approach helps us rank that, and it's a big help to your IT department as they set their policies there. And working with one of the companies, we were able to take their applications and create a precious metals approach, platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. The idea, if this was a platinum application, it's an application that was absolutely mission critical, maybe we are backing those up real time. Maybe we are having those duplicated off-site so that we can carry those back, because that would then have the most value for our company. As you can start to feel, this business impact analysis then provides us with the critical information to manage our business no matter what goes on. As we move forward from there, we think about regulatory requirements. Who do you have to do reports for? And regulators could be, as you might think, state and federal, but it could be a bank. Maybe you have to give them reports for your line of credit or your operating capital in coming back together. It could be a particular client. We do a lot of work in the technology areas where you have service levels, SLAs established, and there's a commitment there. And if it's a regulatory environment, and by the way, back when we were talking about financial or operational impacts, if we identify that, here we'd be saying, who is it that's regulating you? What's the report you have to do, the agency, how frequently you have to do it, and what's the fine or penalty if you don't? Now you're seeing we're getting very specific metrics that will fit into the operation of your business and help you make those critical decisions at each step along the way. So the vital records are similarly, as we go into it, what is an item that you absolutely have to have? Maybe it's a contract, maybe it's a paper area, or if you're in the manufacturing business, it could be design forms. Are those sitting in file cabinets? Are those file cabinets fireproof? Are they on computer systems? Are they backed up elsewhere? Applications, manuals, all of those areas would come together. Any of those, it helps to identify what form they're in, paper or digital, and where they're located and how they're protected. Again, a key element in the area. Special equipment and supplies, we would also want to identify, and again, in a manufacturing environment, we have to have this. We had worked with another manufacturer in New Jersey, and they had created their own testing equipment that tested their product in various environments in various terms, and given the nature of their contracts, they had to be able to document that they had a 100% test rate, not just a sampling rate, on the products that they were delivering. Well, that's a very special piece of equipment. If something happened to it, they're not going to be able to snap their fingers and put it back together. It's going to take them some time to come together. Now, by the way, it could be as simple as paper checks. While we have computer systems that deliver that we can pay online in a variety of other areas, if something happened to our area, do you have paper checks, and does your CFO keep some at home that they could access? There's another example that would fit easily into those areas. Could also be particular printing devices, depending upon the nature of your company. So we took all the information, and let me show you how it comes together. This is a chart from a sample company where we took their departments, and based upon all those answers and the complexity of the data, we were able to rank their departments. And you could see corporate affairs ranked very low, and their retail, property, and management and security ranked very high, given the nature of their business that they are in. Your chart would look different as it's put together. Behind this, there's a very complicated matrix that we use to evaluate and get the data to create this. The advantage of the chart is it's really clear, and our ultimate goal will be to determine what are the Tier 1 and Tier 2 departments. What departments do we have to bring up first, and which departments can we defer? And then we look at recovery time objectives. Now, again, your departments will vary depending upon the company that you're in, but you'll see the difference between these two charts. The one on the left was a result of the information that was gathered purely from the questionnaire or the survey that was done. The second set of charts shows here's how it shifted based upon the interviews that were conducted on those various departments. So if you'll notice that IT dropped from being recurring within a day to being 3 days, that's a big financial savings within the company, and we were able to determine that based upon when we looked at the specific impacts associated with it as it would come together. Now, as we look at the financial impacts within each of the departments and then the operational impacts, you can see a relative criticality, and here's a great example. You'll see that there's that corporate affairs again, scoring a 2, and right below it is engineering a 91. Wouldn't take a rocket scientist to say we got to get engineering up before we get up corporate affairs. And then as we continue on, we take those departments, look at their criticality score ranked, and this would be like that bar graph that we showed you later, but here's the data behind it. Here's the preferred business resumption sequence. I don't know why that was a tongue twister, but it was. The recovery time window, how current does our data have to be, how long is it going to take us to resume the operations, and how complex is it to do so. All of this data comes out of your business impact analysis. That's why this is such an important tool. And then we took the departments and we divided them into recovery tiers. Anybody that's in Tier 1 recovery, those that for this particular company had to recover in either day 1 or 2 or 3, those departments need specific business recovery plans for their department. So we have a business continuity program for the company as a whole, and then on a department-by-department basis, we develop the plans that were appropriate within it. Now, as we continue going forward, some of the departments below that might recover before those recovery time objectives, but that's not our primary mission in the crisis. We look at the analysis, and we can give you these reports by department and for the organization as a whole, and you start to see here what the time sensitivity is, and where the nature of the exposures are. Is it regulatory? Is it brand and reputation? What's going to drive it, and how does it continue to grow over time? You can see this particular company we were looking at didn't have much impact from a regulatory standpoint at all. Other clients, maybe that's the key driver. In this particular area, the quality of service seemed to be the most important one within the organization. And then you look at the expenses and the penalties and where they're occurring, the cumulative impacts over time as those elements would continue. In resuming operations, this is how long does it take to, if the department's completely down, to restore those operations. Some come up very quickly, and in this particular company, it was one, if you got the IT systems back up, they could start to operate, and you can see the big portion of it. Some of the others took longer, and those elements as we focused on it in going through. The dependencies you'll see here for a company, you took a look at the departments like accounting depends on management for invoice approval. If you look at external dependencies, accounting depends on Finance Express for sales transactions, and is there an alternative source? 3 down, you'll see they have one that there's not an alternative source. Application dependency by the department, what's it used for, what's its priority, is it internal or web-based, and then finally special equipment. Having these charts will be fundamentally critical if you're trying to recover the operations and give management the direction that they need to have to carry forward. So our goal today was to give you a little bit of an insight into what's involved in creating a culture of preparedness. Hopefully from what you've heard about a business impact analysis, you can see that that information, that intelligence empowers the organization then to predict and understand the vulnerabilities, understand what the impacts are, what they need to monitor, what the triggers are, develop the appropriate plans, and then be prepared to perform when they need it the most. So what's next? Do you want to know what's going to happen tomorrow? Well, a business impact analysis is going to go a long way toward providing you a better understanding of what's going to happen in your company tomorrow if one of these events that we've been talking about occurs. And can you afford not to know? And the answer is no. You need to know this information. Your employees, your investors, your customers are counting on you to do that. We are going to do a virtual exercise in August, and that's an opportunity if you want to get your team around a conference table in your company and participate in a disaster scenario, and you can see how your team responds relative to others. We can share with you on that. We can certainly work with you to help your plans align to standards and best practices, or help you even create your own intelligence network of understanding what information is out there that you could immediately have access to in those areas, or to schedule some training. If you want a no-fee assessment, looks like I liked it so much, it's up there twice in the heading, but there is a business impact analysis that can be performed, and because of the relationship with the New Jersey MEP, the cost for that is paid for, so that's a free service for your organization to understand where your plans are relative to standards and best practices. So, Joe, thanks for your help at the New Jersey MEP with putting this webinar series together. Do you want to share any comments or thoughts today?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think, culture is a very important part of, I think, most of the programs that NJMEP does with its clients. And, without employee understanding, involvement, and empowerment, it seems like the odds of being successful are against you. So I thought today's presentation was, particularly poignant in terms of understanding preparedness, and, it's about the whole organization and its people being prepared. So I'll be interested to see your virtual exercise at a future webinar.
And that's going to be in August, and we'll get the dates out to that. They may even be up on our website so that anybody can go. And again, there is no cost to participate in the. It'll be a national exercise that we're going to be doing with companies all across the country. By the way, there will be a different version for schools, because that's a different type of an exercise, but we'll be doing a virtual one of those. So if you have children that are in public or private schools, you might want to encourage the school that here's a great opportunity for them to test their plans and see how they would do in those scenarios. So thank you for joining us today. Blair, do you have anything you want to add as we wrap up today? Sounds like Blair is on mute. Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry, Jim. Just unmuting the phone. No, I just want to second Joe's point, and again, thank you for your time and NJMEP for their support.
I think, yeah, and if you haven't taken advantage of the New Jersey MEP, you're missing an opportunity. If you've got questions about today, you can contact us at firestorm.com. There's a contact form there. You can send us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or you can pick up the phone and call us at 800-321-2219. This is the sixth in the webinar series for this year for the New Jersey MEP and Firestorm into the Crisis Coach webinar series. There will be another next month in July. I encourage you to visit, and you can go again to the firestorm.com website and listen to recordings from previous webinars, but it's a good opportunity for you and your team to continue to go. Thank you for what you're doing in your communities. Thank you for building plans within your companies, and we look forward to finding ways that we can help through that process. Everyone have a great day. Until we talk next month, this is Firestorm. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jim.